Hey you guys, it's Peter, and I'm back. Of course I'm back, I'm not going anywhere. Beast! I'm YouTube famous now, available in 2018. The album, Dad AF. Stop dragging my heart around. That's how I feel about this most recent episode of the Shane Dawson Jake Paul series. This episode was called The Secrets of Jake Paul. And what did we find out? That the secrets of Jake Paul happen off camera. That's what we found out in this episode. Okay, so here, let me just tell you where I am with this whole series so far. If you don't know, what you don't know is a lot. I do an after show after every episode. I literally just watched the episode and turned it off and got set up, and here I am making my reaction to it. So I have now watched six episodes of the Shane Dawson Jake Paul series, and the whole series started off with Shane wanting to find out if Jake Paul is a sociopath, which we're going to talk about in just a second, and then wanting to go in and kind of talk about the mind of Jake Paul, what makes Jake Paul tick, kind of finding out everything about him, you know, behind the scenes, all this kind of stuff. And you know, people were very, very upset at first because they were like, so Shane, you're going to give Jake Paul, you know, a platform where people are going to like him. You're going to make me like him, all this kind of stuff. And Shane's like, no, that wasn't my purpose with this series. My purpose with the series was just to kind of go in and really show who Jake Paul is and all that kind of stuff, which he's done. So, you know, I think it's interesting. I can't imagine doing like an 8-part series. You know, I think when you go into it, probably where you start, you know, and where you end up are two completely different places, and you have really no idea going into it, like what's going to unfold. So to go in and say, well, this is my motive and this is my purpose, and then to end up at a different place, I think is probably a very organic, you know, kind of creative process that happens. So even if that wasn't Shane's intention, the fact that it's kind of happening a little bit, I don't know that I necessarily fault Shane for that. I think it's just kind of the nature of the beast of any kind of documentary that you watch. You don't really know what's going to happen, you know? And as I was watching this, I was thinking, and I know it's no comparison, okay, but I was thinking about the Staircase documentary. And if you've watched The Staircase on Netflix, it's about, you know, this wife that's supposedly killed by her husband and him being on trial over I think it's the course of like 10 years, right? Well, when this documentary team started, it's, you know, if somebody had said to them year one, you're going to make this guy look good and you're going to help him, you know, do this. And they would have said, no. Like what we're trying to do is just go in here and blah, 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 right? But over the course of 10 years, they have no idea what's going to happen with that story. So knowing that they're going to be in it for the long run, it's like, how could they possibly know where it's going to end up? And I think that of the series, you know, I think like whatever Shane went in, whatever his intentions were, it's like he didn't know what was going to happen along the way. And I think anybody that had watched Jake Paul from afar for a long period of time, that wasn't like, you know, one of these Pauler people that love Jake Paul, you know, not one of his super fans, but anybody that's just kind of watched the drama unfold, I think it would be very easy to sit back and watch him and say like, yeah, I don't really like this guy, like I don't really get with his gig, like, you know, he probably is a sociopath, whatever, you know, all of these things that people say to him, which is why Shane started the series to begin with, to say, you know, like, yeah, I think that, you know, people are telling me this, I want to find out if he is, if he isn't, and that's why he had, you know, Katie Morton in there, and all, is that her name? Katie Morris? Katie Morton, I don't know, the psychologist lady. Anyway, he had her in there and all this kind of stuff. So this episode, which was called The Secrets of Jake Paul, and I joked and I said where we find absolutely none of the secrets of Jake Paul, or they happen off camera, is because that's kind of really the truth, you know? It's like, okay, so this episode, they go in and they go to Walmart with Jake Paul and his crew, and then they, you know, he meets with Erica Castell, Jake's girlfriend, and kind of sits down and talks to her. And then after that, he like, you know, he talks to Jake about wanting to have Jake come to his house and like sit down and do an interview with him and all this kind of stuff. And then he goes home and kind of recaps it and all this kind of stuff. Well, what's interesting to me about this is that, and I think that Shane is saving it for this very long sit-down interview that he's going to do, because I think he wants that to be like the core of this whole series, that everything that we've learned up to this point will be asked in that one episode. I think what he's waiting, you know, to do is to show it in that one, because if he showed it in this one, then people would be disinterested. I mean, this isn't just, you know, like, let's get all the answers out right at first. This is, I mean, he's also putting together, you know, entertainment. He's also putting together a series. And so at the end, he wants people to be interested. So you wouldn't put in episode 2 all of the answers because nobody would wait and watch episode 8, if that makes sense, right? So, you know, he goes in there and he talks, and like, one of the things that was interesting to me was that when he interviewed Erica Castell, you know, he talked to her for a little bit, and then he shut the camera off, and then he came back on, and he said, we've actually been talking for quite a while. And I was like, okay, so this was like one of the core things about this, this whole like interview, docuseries or whatever was Erica's part in this. But then you shut off all the cameras for her part. Like, I didn't really understand all that. And throughout this episode specifically, Shane said a lot, you know, about things that were said off camera. And I'm kind of like sitting there watching it, and I'm like, okay, well, like, what's being said off camera that can't be said on camera? And I'm really, really hoping that he's going to address that. And at the end of the episode, you know, he showed that, like, in part 7, which is the next episode, that he, like, sits down with Alyssa Violet, and he interviews her and talks about her, and there's, like, a lot of, like, you know, that kind of stuff. And so I have a feeling that will be part of episode 7, and then I think the tail end of part 7 will be Jake and Erica coming to his house, sitting down, getting ready, and I think part 8 will be the wrap-up, which will be the final interview with Jake, which is kind of what we've all been waiting for, you know? But, like, you have to remember, too, like, when I was watching this, I have to say, this was my least favorite part of the whole series so far. It was the least interesting to me of all of it. I didn't really think I found out anything new about Jake. It was very similar to me to part 5, of just seeing him in the house with his friends and kind of walking around and talking. There wasn't, like, Erica didn't say anything. She seems very nice to me, you know, but it didn't seem like I learned anything new about Jake Paul that I didn't learn in the previous episode. And Shane had even, I think, tweeted out something to the effect that this episode wasn't going to be like tea or whatever. It was going to be just kind of like, you know, them sitting around and talking and things like that. So he kind of fed that out, that it wasn't going to be this, like, huge, you know, game changer episode. And so I knew that going into that. At the same time, I thought we would find out, I don't know, a little bit more from Erica. The thing is this, okay, when I was watching it, is that I was thinking to myself, you know, at the end of it, they're talking about, like, he and this psychologist are talking about, like, you know, all of the things that people think about Jake Paul and all this kind of stuff. And I'm sitting there, because they did address some things. Like, they did address the assistant supposedly, you know, being assaulted. And I had actually done a drama video about that, like, when that happened, with the whole FaZe Banks thing going back and forth. And, you know, when I was watching this, I was thinking to myself, like, what are all of the things behind the scenes that people think about Jake Paul that haven't been addressed in this series so far, that people think Jake Paul is such a horrible person for? You know, is it the pranks? Is it the high antics? Is it, you know, the things he says and does to the Team 10 members before they leave and all this kind of stuff? So that was interesting to me. The other thing that was interesting to me, I don't know why, hold on a second, please, was, well, 2 things with Erica in her little interview. Was one, when she said that, like, all of these people live here, and Shane was like, what did you think the Team 10 house was, Shane? I mean, like, I always assumed that all those people lived there. Way back in the day, all the way up to today, I just kind of assumed all those people lived there. So that, to me, I was kind of like, did he not understand that? Like, I don't, how do you not get that from this whole thing? I mean, you know. So anyway, I love that they played that every day, bro, because I used to joke about that song on here. So anyway, the other thing was when he told Erica that Katie was actually not his producer, that she was the therapist or whatever. When Shane had said previously that he had told Jake that there was going to be at some point, like, a therapist that was going to come in this situation, did y'all notice, like, for me, Erica didn't seem surprised whatsoever. I mean, I think all along they've known who she was, right? Like, that didn't seem surprising to me at all. And, you know, when they were talking at the end, Shane and the psychologist, you know, she was saying to him, and she had kind of said it before, that he seems very nice. He's very giving to people and all this kind of stuff. And so then, you know, Shane's not really wanting to talk about the family piece, because this is what he said. If I talk about the family piece, and Jake's fear is that I will lose my family, and that's all I really have at the end of all of this, you know, like, if my career goes, if the money goes, if the people go, if all of that goes, at least I still have my family, right? And so he doesn't really want to talk about family issues, is like what he's saying. But then apparently they've been talking about that off camera, and then Shane is like, should I address it, should I not? And Erica told him that, you know, like, hey, anything goes. Jake said he would do this. And then, you know, the therapist also said, you know, I think you need to ask these questions. Like he said, anything, you know, goes. And that was where, for me, I was kind of like, I was thinking back on, like, some pretty powerful interviews I watched, you know, back in the day. And, like, you know, if you've been around, listen, where's my fan? If you're as old as I am, you know Barbara Walters. And Barbara Walters, you know, used to always do these, like, incredible interviews with people. And she usually did them, like, she would interview 3 people before the Academy Awards. And she always did these very in-depth, you know, interviews. And when she would do them, one of the reasons why she was so highly respected for being, like, one of the most grand interviewers of all time was because she went in and she asked the hard-hitting questions. She asked the questions that everybody wanted to know, and she wasn't afraid to ask them. And the thing was that the person that was going to come down and sit in front of her trusted her enough to know that she was going to handle the thing the same way, you know? And then I was thinking about some other, like, really powerful interviews that have happened over time where, you know, people have sat down and they've really, like, told their truth and told what happened. And I think, you know, if Jake doesn't want to answer the questions, that's on Jake, right? But Shane did say that if he sat down and he asked him things and Jake was going to lie, he was going to get up and walk out. I think as an interviewer, Shane has to ask the questions. I think he has to. Because you can't do an 8-part series on somebody and then shy away at and I don't think he will. I think he will ask the questions. I think Shane really wants to know. I think a little bit of I'm sure he is apprehensive to ask these questions because he's like, well, I don't know what's going to come out, right? I mean, when you're interviewing somebody and you ask a question, it can be a very simple question and you have no idea where that question's going to go, right? So maybe Shane's a little afraid of what's going to come out, and then what's he supposed to do with that in an interview setting, and how is he going to put that into film, you know, and then he is, you know, and she had said this about Shane earlier, that, you know, he's, you know, empathetic towards people, and then Shane's basically saying that I don't want to be responsible for, you know, affecting somebody's life and all this kind of stuff. Well, Jake signed up for this. I mean, he did, and, you know, he knew what he was getting involved in. And so I think Shane's going to have to ask those hard-hitting questions, whether they're about his family or not. The one thing that surprised, and he will, I really believe he will. I believe we will find out some things about Jake from Alyssa Violet in the next episode that maybe is like a different spin, because we're seeing a lot of Erica Castell. So we're seeing what, like, his current girlfriend thinks of him. And so then when Alyssa Violet comes in and she talks about Jake, I think it's going to be interesting to hear, you know, what she has to say about it. The back and forth between, like, he and FaZe Banks, like, that whole part, like, Jake was very honest with that. Like, I mean, he was really honest about his feelings and his emotions and how he was, like, really, really angry and all that kind of stuff. You know, there's a lot of finger pointing that goes on, but I also think, you know, to some degree, maybe, like, that's that age group. I don't know. But, you know, one of the things that I thought was really, really interesting was when Erica and Shane were having the conversation about Greg Paul, Jake's dad, and Shane said, you know, like, when she was explaining that he lives there and that, like, its tensions are high, and she was like, you've seen him walk through rooms and, like, how things change, and they showed, like, a clip of it, but, like, up to that point, we haven't seen Jake's dad anywhere in any of the series, like, walking through or doing anything, other than, like, little clips that they've shown from past videos and things like that. So it's interesting to me that whole conversation came up, and then she said, you know, he really affects it. Other people in the house talk to me about it. You know, they talk about how it affects them and things like that. And then Shane said, should I sit there and talk, or should I talk to him? Do you think I should talk to him and tell him that, you know, he's got to, like, stand on his own 2 feet and whatever? And she's like, yeah, I think he trusts you enough for you to have that conversation with him. And when I saw that, I thought, okay, so this is where it all kind of changes. Like, this is where, and now we're in episode 6, and this is what I was talking about at the beginning. Where you start and where you end up, you don't really know, like, how that's going to happen. And it's very organic, right? You know, it's like, you have no idea. It's like, you know, any kind of artistic, you know, medium. It's like when you sit down and you start making a painting, what you have in your head is probably not exactly where you're going to end up at the end. And I believe the same to be true of this documentary series. So, whereas at the beginning, Shane really wanted to find out, like, the mind of Jake Paul and what was going on, and he really wanted to, like, get in there, and is he a sociopath, is he not? Which, in this episode, basically what we found out is that he's not a sociopath. I mean, the therapist basically says it. Shane agrees with her. I did think it was interesting that Shane said that he and Jake Paul are a lot alike. Did you guys notice that? And maybe it's things that we don't see on camera. Like, there have been some things I've caught that, like, Jake has said or done in this series that I'm thinking to myself, like, oh, that's very similar to Shane. But I don't know that I necessarily think they're that much alike, unless it's, like, how they think about the whole YouTube world or making videos or their creativity or whatever. Something that maybe we're not seeing the full picture of. I thought that was interesting. But, I think that we've kind of led up to this point that we knew that that wasn't the case with him, that he wasn't a sociopath. And basically that's what they said in this episode, that he isn't a sociopath, is basically what she said. So that was, we've gotten that out of the way and now we've moved on. Well, then the next phase is going to be finding out all the things behind Jake. But in this episode, what was interesting to me and talking to Erica Castell was when Shane said, do you think that I should talk to him? And I was like, okay, so this is where it's organically moved now, right? This is Shane being empathetic towards other people and wanting them to have a better life for themselves than they already have. And we've seen this in every series that he's done so far, that he really wants to help people. Like, at Shane's core, it's not about YouTube. It's not about the documentary series. It's not about this. I think that he really feels for people, and he really wants to help them and see something different in them than maybe other people see and give them the benefit of the doubt. And I have to say, okay, like, I'm not going to start watching Jake Paul videos tomorrow because I'm just not interested, honestly, in seeing somebody roll across, a boxing ring on mousetraps. Like, to me, listen, I'd rather watch time traveler videos or see aliens in space and all that kind of stuff. I'm not real, interested in seeing all those kind of pranks. That's just me. So I'm not going to probably start watching Jake Paul tomorrow, but I will say this series has changed my perception of him. And what I thought of him based on all the drama and what I had seen before is not necessarily what I think of him now. So for all of the people out there that were like, oh, Shane, don't do this, don't do that, don't do this, I don't know that Shane did that, but this series has. I think we've seen a different side of Jake. And when I was watching this, I was thinking to myself, I keep on going past this one thing I want to talk about, so I'll get to that at the end. But, I keep on thinking to myself, and is that such a bad thing? Like, really? Is that such a bad thing? Like, if Jake Paul really is just this kind of normal guy that wants to be famous, and he wants acceptance and validation from people, and he wants to be successful in life, what's wrong with that? Like, if it's like he's got all these people around him and all that kind of stuff, and, maybe, like, a lot of the things that he's done are misunderstood, then, is that a bad thing? Like, that Shane has exposed the light on somebody actually being a good person? Like, I don't know that I think that that's a bad thing, right? I don't know. You guys are there's a lot of people out there who are gonna be like, no, that is a bad thing. Well, I don't know. Like I said in my video yesterday, we live in a social media world where it's like people want to always believe the worst about people instead of, like, maybe giving somebody the benefit of the doubt. And I think that's kind of what Shane's about. And so he says to Erica, do you think I should talk to Jake about this, about how he needs to stand on his own 2 feet? And the psychologist is saying, that it's not healthy for him to, like, and I love the analogy that she used where he said, that he sleeps and lives in the same house that he's, like, working in, right? And she said, it's like why you don't study in bed because you can't really turn your mind off. And I thought that was a fantastic analogy. I think it's like why, like, couples should never fight should never argue in the bedroom, because it's the same kind of thing, And so, yeah, I think when you look at all of this, Shane is really wanting to help him at the end, because now Shane has seen who he is as a person, and he's really wanting to, like, get to the core of that person and help him out be a better person. If you go back several, I think it was like maybe the second episode, Shane says in there, okay? He says in the episode, and I even made a joke about it in my reaction video, that, he wants to go in and maybe, help Jake be a better person. And now we've come to fruition to see that happen. And I do think that Shane is going to have some kind of positive effect on, Jake Paul. And so it's kind of a win-win situation. We get to really see who Jake Paul is, and maybe that's not a bad thing, and then also Shane gets to help Jake Paul at the end of this. And why is that a bad thing? And what, to some degree, Shane is doing, okay? Because I'm talking about, like, the interviewing questions, and he's got to ask the hard-hitting questions, yes. But as I'm sitting here watching this, and I'm like, okay, is this an interview? Is this a documentary series? Or is this him helping somebody out? Why can't it be all three is what I came up with. And I'm like, Shane is really changing how we look at documentaries. He's really changing how we look at interviews. He's really changing YouTube to some degree on creating a new kind of form of documentary where we really ask the hard-hitting questions and we get behind the mind of somebody, and then we also show different sides of them, but also maybe help them at the same time. And I think that's fantastic. And it's very interesting to me. And I'm kind of now, to be honest with you, like as we kind of wind down to the end of the whole Jake Paul thing, like this episode wasn't super exciting to me, honestly. But now I'm kind of like, okay, who's Shane gonna do next? Like that's the thing that I want to know now. Like, and he's gonna take like 3 months off and not do another series right away. But I'm like, okay, who's he gonna do next? Like who's gonna be the big next series that he's gonna do? So I kind of actually like to see, and this will never happen, but it would be interesting to see him do like PewDiePie. Like, would you guys like to get behind that or see that? I think that would be real interesting. But there's a lot of YouTubers that I would like to see him do, not see him do, but see him do a series on, even if it's just a, 2-part series or a 1-part episode, maybe Shane could start doing, like once a month, like an episode just on one YouTuber and going in and like, kind of like these bigger YouTubers, Colleen Ballinger and people like that, and just kind of showing really like what makes him tick. Part of what's interesting to me we haven't seen is like the making of the YouTube videos and the behind the scenes and how they pick the merch and stuff like that. I know that sounds corny, but to me, like I think that would be interesting to see kind of that, because I think that's a lot of what Jake is really interested in. I will say one thing, it's like, she was talking about how nice Jake is, and he has this big house, and he does all this stuff for other people, and on and on and on. And while I agree that that is fantastic, I do think you have to ask, like, what are his motives for that? Like, it's not like he has this Team 10 house, and he has all these people living there, and he's giving all this money away because he's not benefiting. I mean, Jake Paul is benefiting off of this, and I think at the end of the day, he's a very probably just normal person that wants some of the same things that we all want out there. Maybe I'm wrong, I don't know. Is he a sociopath? What do you guys think? But I also think that he has a very smart business model set up. And, it's interesting when you talk about these investors that came in and helped with the original house. How many of those investors helped Jake Paul set up this business model? Like, that's what I want to know. Like, are there faces behind the scenes that we don't know who they are? Are there big-time investors, like producers, so to speak, that are behind the scenes that are running this whole thing? I mean, is it not just Jake Paul? Is it not just his dad? Is it not just the Team 10 house? Is there like a team of investors behind the scenes that's running this like business cooperative that we don't know anything about? Because when they talked about that, that was really interesting to me, because for somebody to invest that kind of money in somebody, they wouldn't just say, here, we're going to give you this kind of money in a house. Like, they would want a business plan set up in place. So I would like to know that a little bit. I'd like to know the business behind the Team 10 model. And since he asked Nick Crompton, I'm sure that Shane's going to ask Jake Paul those questions too. So I'm excited to see the last 2 episodes. It's just going to, I think the 7 and 8 are going to be the best episodes of the whole series. I can't wait to see the rest of it. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. I love you, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye.